My butthole puckered a little bit too. Hey, what's going on, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot fam? So I wanted to take a moment to do a video based on some of my experiences with this geared reverse transmission from SuperATV. And the reason for that being, I believe there's a good bit of information about this that's kind of not known yet, or not a lot of people with experience with it have given this information out. And so just based on my own experiences with it, which I've had it for about 6 months now, give or take. I wanted to, just put together a little informational video, and I say little. This video might be a little long. It might drag on a little bit, but I'm gonna break it down into a couple of different parts. I'll timestamp everything, and you guys can skip ahead if you need to. If you don't care about some of the other stuff, you can bounce around. Hopefully, you watch the whole video, but I understand. So I'm gonna get right into it. The SuperATV Geared Reverse transmission is an all-in-one turbo-style complete drop-in transmission replacement for the XP1000. Now, being a turbo-style, that means it has a different final drive, which results in a different high gear, a lower low gear. In addition, you got your advertised, no reverse chain. What they don't tell you is that the snorkel is actually much stronger due to having more teeth. And you also get the beefier GDP case. There's some other things like, bearing retainer, stuff like that, but I'll get into that in a minute. So the fitment is all XP1000s from 2014 to 2023, 2 and 4 seaters alike, but only the 2015 to 2016 high lifters. I believe this is due to the 17 plus high lifters having different pinion or output gear. The same reason why their front diffs are different and not interchangeable with the other XPs. Which means this probably applies to all Rock and Trail models as well. I'm not 100% on all that. I don't own a high lifter or Rock and Trail model. There may be some yearly differences as well. So, if you have any questions, just reach out to SuperATV and ask them. They're pretty cool. They have a pretty good tech line. And, they've answered most of the questions I've had, unless it was some proprietary crap. But, the fitment above is pretty straightforward from their site. So just use that as kind of a guide. And if you're planning to retrofit this into another machine, like a Ranger or something, either wait for that model or be prepared to do a little extra work. But if you're doing that kind of stuff, you probably already kind of know that this is going to be a little bit of a chore. Some notes, for normal XP1000s, the 2014 2015 have a different input shaft due to running a different team-tied secondary clutch. The 2016 has a different input shaft because it has a factory low gear reduction. And I believe all the 17 plus machines are the same. There might be small yearly differences, but for the most part, they should all be similar. This is a complete drop-in replacement for the XP1000. If you're looking for a turbo-style transmission without all the extra stuff, this is for you. They send you a motor trans mount that will replace your factory one, and this is to account for the differences in the transmissions. The XP turbo-style transmission is much larger. Also has different mounting points. So this basically just accounts for all those differences. Some earlier versions of this mount, which I had, did have some issues, but I believe they have since been corrected. I reached out to SuperATV and they sent me an updated one, and it has fixed my issues, and I've had no issues since. So, they worked with me. They're pretty good about it. The transmission uses the OEM style heat treated gears. It gets rid of the reverse chain in favor of a gear reverse. That's pretty much the main reason you're getting it. And It does that job very well. I love having a geared reverse, not have to worry about if that chain's going to snap, get bound up in some gears, etc. Additionally, it has the much stronger snorkel gear setup from the turbo. For those unfamiliar, the turbo is a 19 tooth and the 1000 is a 13 tooth. Fun fact, the 2024 still has a 13 tooth, so have fun with that. This is one of the most common failure points on the 1000s, and it's mainly due to that weaker design of the 13 tooth. This overall setup is much stronger. That is where mine failed. So also, you get the 300M output shaft, upgraded thicker bearing retainer. Not noted is that the bearing retainer is a turbo style, which is 6-bolt instead of 4-bolt on the 1000. This means, you know, less flex, less deflection, stronger. You'll also get the beefed up GDP case, which is stronger due to the larger gussets, reinforcements in key areas like the snorkel tube and output hubs. Additionally, there's cooling fins all over the case, help keep temps low. I don't think that's really a huge deal unless you're like running in super hot areas, but you know, if that matters to you, there it is. When you order the transmission, you will have the options for different stock gearing. And basically it's any of the SuperATV gear reductions that they sell. So they have a stage 2 and a stage 3 gear set that you can combine. And these combos can get you between 12, 25, and 38% overall gearing reduction. And depending on your setup, and if you order that with the transmission, they are free. So if that's those two things, or if those gear reduction options interest you, order them with the transmission, save yourself a couple bucks. But we're going to touch on this a little bit later and what your options actually are, because it's actually different than what you think it is. There's no turf mode, of course, but that's a given. I think this is more for people that may retrofit these into other machines. I don't remember any XP1000 having turf mode. I could be wrong. Mine's an 18, no turf mode, so I'm not sure. Now, here's where I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. So since owning this transmission, I've learned a lot of information in a short period of time. And it's mostly what motivated me to make this video. I've helped a few people in Facebook groups, and I just kind of wanted to share what I've learned, have like a, you know, just a reference point that I can refer people to for information on this thing. So when I ordered this transmission, I used my stock transmission part number, and the most reduction available was 25%. For a 2-seater, I believe this is 38%. 4-seaters already have a slightly lower reverse shaft setup, so they kind of equal out in the long run. In my experience so far, for my riding style, the 25% is not nearly enough for a heavy 4-seater on 35s. And if you plan to run more than 35s, then that definitely is not enough. So to clarify, I am coming from a built stock transmission that had the 54 12-12 reduction for a 4-seater. This transmission performed really well, and I didn't really have any problems with it. And in fact, the gear reduction just made a world of difference in the type of riding I did. So I loved it. Unfortunately, I ended up detonating the snorkel on a hill climb, and that's kind of what prompted me to do the upgrade. I was tired of having that weak point. So the stock 1000s, I believe all the 2017 plus have a 3161 low gear set. So if you have a 2017 plus, the geared reverse transmission, you will probably still get the 3161 low gear set. Now, I'm not diving into the parts fish to see the differences in every single machine, but most of the 17 pluses are all similar. And I believe if you order a 17 plus geared reverse transmission, you will also get the 3161. I did, and all the ones I looked at had it as well. In a stock transmission, you would normally change the stock input shaft to a high lifter input shaft, which gets you the 2567 low gear set. This plus the ACE gear set would give you, you know, your standard 54 12 12 or 54 25 25, whatever the numbers end up being, you know, overall reduction. And that's what most people run. That's what I ran, and it worked good. Unfortunately, I don't think you can do that in a geared reverse transmission because there's no chain, and the high lifter input shaft uses a chain. And you can't run a turbo input shaft because there's a different clutch setup. Now, here's some of your options. You may be able to change the secondary to a turbo style into a turbo input shaft, but I'm not sure, so I don't want to mislead anyone. And then that would give you the options to do, you know, the turbo style gear reductions. If you know for sure, you know someone who's done it, comment below and let me know. you know, I'll add something to the comments or whatever, make a follow-up video, and we'll talk about it. If you want to sponsor me to buy the parts and find out, I'm all for it. I'll rip the transmission out. I'll throw some stuff together and figure it out. Actually, I'm not going to do that. I would buy another transmission and sell it, but that'd be fun. Anyway, hey, I'm all for it. You guys let me know. Otherwise, I'll just assume the two aren't compatible, and I'm not experienced enough to say yes or no either way. So if you have a 17 plus, as far as I know, you can choose 12, 25, 38% overall reduction straight from SuperATV, and it's no extra cost. This reduction is similar to running the Ace gear set. Ace is a stage 2 gear set. And for future reference, this is also referred to the reverse shaft. I think this is different in a 1K or different machines. I don't know. I'm just going to refer to this as the stage 2, and then the other piece as a stage 3. I believe that's what it is. Now, due to the 4-seaters and 2-seaters having different reverse shafts, you'll get a different amount of reduction. At the end of the day, by the time this is all said and done, the two will be the same, so it won't really matter. Now, a reminder though, these are overall reductions. So if you're doing those SuperATV or Ace, whatever, it's overall. So that's high, low, reverse in general. And if all you ever do is trail ride, roads, and rarely do a technical trail, this is a great setup for 32, 30-inch tires, and hell, even 35-inch tires with some decent clutching. The last few videos of my channel are literally me using this exact same setup on 35s. Royal Blue, Indian Mountain, 35s, big heavy 4-seater, and using their 25% reduction. So it can work. I do rock crawl though, and I felt like it wasn't enough. And I did have some belt slip issues on some tougher trails. So obviously, you know, your mileage may vary. Now, you're going to have a couple options here, and depending on how much reduction you want, will kind of depend on which choices you pick. And at the end of this, I'll let you know which choices I picked and how I feel about it. So option 1 is the ProUTV Stage 3. If you're looking for more overall reduction, then the ProUTV Stage 3 will net you another 6% over the SuperATV Stage 3 for a total of around 19%. Now, once again, this is overall. That's high, low, reverse. This is a good option if you don't care to have a super fast machine and you want a stronger gear set for technical hills, trails, you name it. If you're planning to run big tires, enough overall reduction is big because, you know, the tires counter the gear reduction. So option 2 is the Turbo R Stage 2. Once again, this is a reverse shaft. So similar to the ProUTV Stage 3, you can also swap to the Turbo R reverse shaft. This will get you the 2350 reverse shaft setup that comes out of the Turbo R instead of your 2548 setup. This will net you an additional 6% over the Ace SuperATV Stage 2 for another total of around 19%. Once again, this is good for the same reasons as number 1 and can be combined with number 1 for larger tires, hill killing setups, tough trails, you name it. So if you could honestly just do those two things, get another 12, 13%, and that might be enough for you. Reduce everything, run big tires. I don't know. It wasn't enough for me though. So now you might be wondering, option 3, why didn't you talk about the 2014, 2016 models? Well, I don't have them, so I can't really talk about them too much, but mainly because they kind of end up here. You know, like they're going to end up right here at option 3, and they're going to have some of the same options I'm about to give you. So stick with me. See, the input shaft in the gear reverse transmission is kind of unique. It's a little bit of a one-off. It's basically a turbo style input shaft, but for a 1000 clutch. That's why before I mentioned that I don't know if you could technically put a turbo input shaft in here and run a turbo secondary. You might can. I'd love to find out because I wouldn't mind running a turbo secondary. The 2014, the 2015 have a different team tied secondary clutch and thus a different input shaft. So if you wanted to do a big reduction on a 2014, 2015, you'd need to change to the 2016 plus secondary. Additional note here that the team tied design can be used on the newer machines if it's built for the newer machines. So that style clutch can be built to work with a newer machine. I personally run it, so I know there's companies that make it, but it's made for the newer input shaft, so don't get the two confused. Some companies like MCB, Gilliman, SLP, they all make something like this. Now, if you have a 2016, hey, you're here. You're in the right spot, because you already have this low gear setup, because you already have the 2567 input shaft low gear combination due to the factor gear reduction that's unique to your machine. Theoretically, if you wanted a higher low gear ratio, you could switch to the 2017 input shaft and low gear setup. But why would you do that? That's what high's for. Keep that low gear. Now, for the rest of us with a 17 plus machine and wanting more low gear reduction, you need to swap to the 2016 input shaft. This will get you the 2567 low gear instead of the much higher 3161 gear setup. This is the same as the high lifter input swap on the stock transmission that I mentioned earlier, and will net you, 36% reduction, somewhere in there. But this is low only, and that's important because, maybe you want to keep your high gear for road riding. That's fine. These percentages, of course, are tough to decipher because in the real world, most people aren't measuring gear reductions in percentages. They're measuring it in rotations. So if you're like me, not running 37s or 39s yet, I'll say yet, you never know, and you want a lower low, and you still might use high for road riding, trail riding, occasional hill killing, then you're probably not interested in options 1 or 2, and this option 3 is your move. You'll have greater control in the slow technical stuff, and it'll just, it'll save your belt and everything else. So that's probably your thing. Now, there's a big however here. Now, unless someone else comes along and starts making these input shafts, you can only get them for SuperATV. Now, like I said, if someone knows otherwise, tell me and I'll add it to the comments or the description. So get your phone out, call SuperATV sales department for the information I put in the description, on the screen, whatever. And depending on what you're looking for, they may have it, they may not, I don't know. But for the most part, they had what I needed. Now, if you already have a 2016, like I said, you're good to go. And if you have a 16 and want more reduction, then options 1 and 2 are for you. So if you're running big tires, that's what you want to do. Now, if you have a 2015 or 2014, you need a secondary clutch from a 2016 plus, and all the other stuff that I'm going to mention below for options 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. If you're 2017 plus and have not ordered a transmission yet, just order the 2016 transmission from the get-go. This will save you this hassle, and you can get it right away with already ready for this gear reduction. And they're interchangeable. Now, I didn't know this. I wish I did, and that's just something I learned over time. So, learn from me. There are 2 transmissions for the 2016 that I could tell, and depending on the stock part numbers, you might get a slightly different higher low gear, stage 2, whatever, but you're going to be changing all that out anyway. Now, what you want is in the description below, and so is the part combination to get the right part on the website, or call and order on the phone. Now, if you're like me and you already have a 2017 transmission or higher, then you need to call SuperATV and talk to their sales department and tell them you want to buy a geared reverse transmission input shaft for a 2016 RZR XP 1000. The part number for the input shaft is in the description below, and it's somewhere around $270, $280. Now that may be different today. It may have gone up a little bit since I bought mine. I don't know. I'm one man. I can't keep track of everything. Now, finally, head to your favorite OEM parts dealer and buy yourself a 67 tooth low gear. I like Rocky Mountain. You guys can use Partzilla. Doesn't matter. They all work. Stock part. The 67 tooth part number is in the description. All right. So I put together some good to knows here. Just some stuff based on my experience messing with this, taking it in and out a few times. I've now had the machine or the transmission out 3 times for random reasons. Different transmission changes, whatever. So the new case is physically much larger than the stock transmission. It will take some finessing to get it back into the frame, and the best advice I have is to just pay attention to the way you get the stock one out. You're probably, shimming it, leaning it over and shimming it out a little sideways, and The new one's going to go in kind of similar. It's just much bigger. Best advice I have is to tip it over so the top goes in first, kind of at an angle, slide it in until the bottom is just over the frame rail, and then it should be able to pivot. Yeah, your mileage may vary. Maybe you have another method. You know, if you're at this point, you're probably, you know, kind of familiar with it already, but just play with it. It's tight.
That's what she said.
Additionally, the airbox intake plenum is the same. Loosen everything around the intake manifold, remove what you can. Even doing that, I had to trim the airbox edges, you know, kind of like where the reinforcement edges are, the gussets, where the two pieces mate together, to get it to slide in. And even that took some force. It's just, it's big. It doesn't fit right. And if you're not trying to take the bed off, you're going to have to manipulate it a little bit. Next, the bottom of the transmission case is really, really close to the transmission plate. Some of you may have already hit some crap and this thing is bent upwards, and there's a good chance it's going to touch the bottom of the transmission. Regardless, you should go ahead and, while you have the transmission out, get rid of this thing. A stock skid plate's not good enough. A aftermarket HTP skid plate's not good enough. Get yourself a bash plate. Trust me, 1/4 inch steel or more. Weld this thing in there. Protect your transmission. The transmission will, this new transmission sits like a centimeter or less off of the stock skid plate, the stock trans plate. You're going to need more room. If you hit a rock the right way, you're going to break your transmission. Just go ahead and plan for this. Do it while the transmission's out, and it's a lot easier. There's a few companies that sell these. They're decent. We made our own. Like, I think I have a picture of us welding it on our page. So, you know, look into that. Use the factory torque specs and torquing orders. You can Google the service manual if you don't already have one. The order that stuff gets put in matters, especially for like clutch alignment, and it can affect, you know, how things perform. Make sure you follow the torque specs because you can blow out some soft aluminum threads real quick. You'll most likely need to adjust your shift cable, so just go ahead and plan for that. Mine was off a little bit, and if your machine is not locking into gear correctly, then that's what you got to do. You know, I jacked mine up on jack stands, put it in gear, made sure it engaged correctly, went through all the gears, checked the dash, made sure it was registering right, then took it for a little drive, saw how it did, made sure it wasn't grinding or binding up, you know, made sure it didn't have any noises on deceleration, that kind of stuff. And if everything's good, you're good to go. Tighten it up. The green retaining compound they give you for the vent tube is kind of crap. I went ahead and used something a little higher quality. I prefer like the green Loctite. Also, I clocked the tube, I want to say a little further backwards, because with the increased size of the new transmission, I found that with the tube on the vent piece, that it was wedged right into the bottom of the intake plenum. And what happened was, over time, this would just work it loose, and you don't want that thing to be loose, accidentally pop out, etc. So I just kind of just clocked it. You can do it forward or backwards, I believe, but either way, just clock it a little bit. That way it clears the damn intake plenum. This is also a great time to go ahead and upgrade or replace your motor mounts if they're worn out. Transmission mount, and even that mounting tube, if it, it's not uncommon for those things to get cracked, and you wouldn't even know it unless you're looking for it. Now, this is kind of a debated topic. It's generally advised to not run a solid transmission mount, as it does allow some flex in case of a solid hit or a wreck. And of course, a broken mount is always cheaper than to replace than a transmission. I'm running it. I'll see how it goes. I hope everything happens. But one thing to keep in mind is, with solid mounts, you will get more driveline vibration feeling throughout the machine. That doesn't bother me. Another thing is stuff like the Sandcraft motor mounts are actually raised, and that's not much. It's maybe like a centimeter or two, and what it does is it helps straighten out the driveline, decreases that angle, and helps with performance there. Small things. All those things add up to be a slightly better machine. And finally, I highly recommend you buy a clutch alignment tool. Unlike the turbos, we have to do this manually. After putting everything in with the correct torque orders, mine was pretty close. But still, go ahead and get you a tool or borrow one. Do it right. Make sure it's good. This is also a good time to check your in and out alignment. You know, make sure your belt's sitting in the center of your primary. You know, you can shim your secondary if you need to. And it's always a good time just to do some small things and check stuff like that. Clutch alignment plays a big role in the performance of your machine. Now, here's the the controversial piece that most people are probably waiting for here. Is this right for me? If you are not in a hurry, you don't mind sourcing parts, you want all OEM, willing to do a little more work, have a 2016 plus. I believe this matters for the holes that are on the case, and you're willing to spend a little more money because this will cost a little more money, and you really just want what is probably the best overall option, and take the time and put together an actual turbo swap. Trust me, it's worth it. You'll need a few extra parts like the drive shaft, clutch housing, secondary clutch housing cover, vent tubes, etc. But in the end, it's worth it. The turbo secondary is taller, which means you get better gearing. Essentially, you get a lower low gear. You know, like this does affect your gearing, and you'll have a higher high end. In addition, you can run a turbo drive shaft, which has the flange. And I think this is more important for the 4-seaters, but this still will allow you to do a very quick drive shaft detachment in emergencies or for service. Personally, I don't know if there's some secret magic voodoo way of removing the drive shaft from a 4-seater 1K without tearing it apart. And if you know it, put it down below and I'll look at it. But in general, it is a pain in the butt to pull the 4-seater drive shaft on the trail. And it's not even fun to do it in the garage. So if you've never seen a turbo drive shaft, it has that flange on it where the two pieces just bolt together. And if you need to take the thing apart for any reason, it's just a couple bolts. Zip tie that thing out of the way and carry on. That is so easy, and I love easy. Now, if you just want a simple swap with majority of the benefits, like the stronger snorkel, geared reverse, upgraded case internals, drop-in, compatibility, etc., then hey, absolutely grab the geared reverse transmission. It will end up being a little cheaper than a full swap. And if the other benefits aren't that important to you, it's really hard to beat the value. Don't forget, you can also get it on a discount. Get it with a coupon code, use your store credit. You can get the thing fairly cheap in comparison. It's really hard to beat that value. I do not regret my decision. Let me clarify that. I do not regret my decision. I love this thing. It has vastly changed the way I look at riding my machine. Not having to worry about the reverse shaft. I mean the reverse chain. Not having to worry about that snorkel gear anymore, which it still could blow up, but I'm on a 1K. Like, I'm not running big power. I think you'll be happy with this. If I wasn't in a hurry, I probably would have went the other route, but I had limited time. And I still do not regret it. In the future, who knows what the world holds for me, but for now, this works fine. So you'll be happy either way, I promise. It's an absolute game changer. Now, if you stuck with me this far, I hope this video has provided you with some good information to help you on your 1,000 journey. If you have any questions, leave them below. I'll do my best to answer them or point you in the right direction. At the end of the day, I'm just a regular guy like you guys, and I've had to learn a lot of this stuff the hard way with limited help. And along the way, I've met some awesome people that helped me and pointed me in the right directions, like guys on the Razor forums. These dudes are awesome. There's some really knowledgeable folks out there. Some of them don't necessarily share the information. I wish they would. But, occasionally you can find the right people and they'll tell you some stuff, and I just want to share the things I've found out. So I threw myself into the ring and I tried these various setups to see what worked for me and what didn't. And at the end of the day, I ended up doing stage 3 for option 3 as well as option 1. Now, I've gone on one ride since doing this swap, and I love it. I don't know what on paper my reduction actually is, but it's something like 70% in low, maybe more. I don't know, and 50% or 40 or 50% higher and low. I don't know. It's low, but with that said, I can still do over 20 miles an hour in low. I think this past ride I saw 24, which that's on the dash. GPS that might be closer to 30. And then I know for a fact I can do over 40, maybe even 50 still in high. I haven't tried yet, but it will. And if that's good enough for you and you want a low for crawling, then this is absolutely going to be a game changer for you. At the end of the day, I have some extra parts laying around. Like I did buy the Turbo R reverse shaft just to play around with it and check it. And so I have it available if I want to mess around with it. And I'll mess around with things until, I'm happy with everything. And I think right now I just need a little extra clutching to get things really dialed in. Anyway, I hope this has, alleviated some of your confusion or saved you a headache and time, whatever. And if it has, then hey, I succeeded in my goal. I hope y'all have a great 2024 riding season or whatever year you may end up seeing this video. Best of luck and wishes to you in all your endeavors. Make sure you show some love and support to the channel by liking, subscribing, and sharing. And hey, don't forget, we've got some really, really bad merch in our store. A couple t-shirts, nice hoodie, stickers, you name it. If you have any ideas, send them our way. Peace out, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot fam.